Hello there. I hope you're all doing well today. My name is Justin, and we are going to be analyzing the following paper using self-determination theory to promote physical activity and weight control in a randomized control trial in women. One of the core tenets of this trial, one of the core pieces of information surrounding it is that of self-determination theory. That argues that people are motivated to satisfy three general needs. You have competence, which means you have necessary skill, strength, or knowledge to complete something. Autonomy, you're self-determined and controlled, and social connectedness, you belong or connect to a group. SDT is useful for understanding motivation and how people in a physical activity setting stick to exercise programs. SDT also accounts for the quality of motivation regulating behavior that lies on a certain spectrum from the lowest to the highest autonomously self-determination forms. You have external regulation through obtaining rewards, introductive regulation, internalizing behavioral regulation, but not fully accepting it as your own, identified regulation. So you participate due to holding onto an outcome significant and important, and intrinsic regulation, the highest autonomous form. That is where you're engaging in activity due to its inherent satisfaction and fun to you, its interest to you, and its challenge or difficulty to you. SDT can also facilitate motivational development, noting how more controlled regulations can be internalized and transformed into autonomous motivation in a scenario or environment where you're able to foster the three things you need satisfied with SDT, that being autonomy, relatedness, and competence. When you meet these requirements for SDT, you more self-determined forms and motivational regulation guiding adaptive behaviors can occur. Research utilizing SDT shows that autonomous motivation is linked with improved attendance or continuing of exercise programs, drops in BMI, and improved adherence to weight loss programs, along with some other factors such as diet control and reduced smoking in adults. With this information in mind, the goal of this paper involved analyzing a 1 year impact of SDT-based interventions on certain regulatory variables and on primary outcomes of this trial through physical activity and exercise, weight, and body composition in previously overweight or obese premenopausal women. After 12 months, the researchers hypothesized two ideas. The participants within this condition would report greater perceived autonomy support, more autonomous self-regulation, higher exercise intrinsic motivation, perceived competence, in more internal locus of causality, more autonomous motives of exercise, as an example, along with higher exercise levels and increased weight loss, as well as the intervention they hypothesized would produce this effect increasingly over time. As it compares to the control group, they say that the paper or the authors of the paper stated or hypothesized that the intervention would progressively increase the internalization of self-regulation for exercise and promote more weight loss along time during the first year through an intermediate or 4 month stage and an interventions and or 12-month period. The study design itself, it was a randomized control trial of a 1 year behavioral change intervention and then a 2 year follow-up period with no intervention. The participants entered the study in 3 annual cohorts, which each one split into two randomly assigned groups using a random number generator. The experimental groups received equal face-to-face contact with treatment providers, so 29 in the control, 30 in the intervention group. Those sessions in the control group were delivered and grouped in thematic courses such as healthy preventative nutrition, stress management, and self-care, and so forth. Interpersonal climates within the intervention promoted in this condition was similar to that commonly observed in standard healthcare settings. Choices, rationale, and explanations were limited. Specific behavioral goals were not set because they did not want to control, if you will. They wanted more autonomy for the patients, for the participants, and minimal feedback was provided. Participants were recruited through newspapers, flyers, and TV ads to enroll in a university-based behavioral weight loss program. The requirements to be in the study had to be between, for example, 25 and 50 years old, premenopausal, not pregnant, BMI between 20 and 40, willing to attend weekly meetings, not free from major illnesses, and so forth. Those are just some of the requirements that the researchers needed for their participants. The intervention itself Those sessions occurred weekly or bi-monthly and lasted 120 minutes each. In order to create that autonomy supportive environment, 6 things were done to promote a sense of ownership over one's behavior. They built sustainable knowledge that supported informed choices through neutral language during interpersonal communication, encouraging choice and self-initiation, provide their participants with if you will, a menu of options and a variety of avenues for behavioral change, support the presentation of tasks and choices with a clear rationale to adopt behavior, with noting clear distinctions between the behavior and the outcomes. They also encourage the people involved to build and explore comparisons between their values and goals. And they gave informational positive feedback, highlighting how competence grows from feedback inherent to tasks. The structure of the intervention itself, it was structured through modules with the end goal for long-term weight control behaviors. For example, it goes from increasing knowledge of weight loss and nutrition, you trigger the weight loss, adopt and increase the activity, address the barriers, promote self-regulation, and then you improve body image. And at the end, module 5, continue that weight control behavior. Several instruments, questionnaires, and scales were used to measure intervention feedback, exercise, and physical activity. These are just some of the tools listed. Not all of them were listed, as it would take up a good majority of time, if you will, to go through every single one. For example, the healthcare climate questionnaire was used to perceive needs support and what degree care providers were autonomy supportive versus controlling, self-determination scale. So how patients function in a self-determined way, exercise self-regulation questionnaire, assess domain-specific individual differences in type motivations or regulation, and a 7-day physical activity recall. It determined duration of intensity of physical activities. With this in mind, we look at the results for self-regulation of treatment and exercise. Participants in the intervention group had higher levels of self-determination and autonomous self-regulation for treatment, and more autonomy supported perceived treatment clinic. This same pattern was noted in exercise-related targets, such as exercise intrinsic motivation, internal locus of causality, and so forth. Participants scored higher in these variables. When they compared, the researchers, the intervention and the controls at that 12-month period, the intervention targets, for example, autonomous self-regulation, intrinsic motivation, and so forth. They showed medium to large effect sizes favoring the intervention. Body attractiveness of reason and external regulation showed small or negative effect sizes. For physical activity, people within the intervention had higher levels of physical activity through more steps per day and more minutes of moderate and vigorous activity. Weight and body composition. So there was more weight loss with the intervention group. The mean difference between the intervention and the control was 6%. The graph on the right, over here to the right, showcased weight change during the first year for both groups. And just a quick rundown of some of the stats. The intervention group lost 5.6 kgs of fat mass versus negative 1.5 kgs in the control group. BMI change was negative 2.3 kgs versus 0.7 kgs in the control. Participants who attended or adhered to 80% more of the intervention sessions showed the following data favoring intervention: like negative 5.9% in body weight change, a difference in moderate and vigorous activity, physical activity minutes, steps per day in walking, large effect sizes regarding lifestyle index, and more autonomous forms of regulation for exercise. The intervention group had noticeably larger numbers compared to the control group in a lot of these aspects of weight and body composition. For group-specific time course changes in self-regulation, there was a significant main effect of the group on autonomous forms of self-regulation, such as intrinsic, identification, and introjection. And there were higher scores for intervention and a time effect for introjection, with a decrease in both groups. There was a significant time by group effects for intrinsic, identification, and external regulation. This showcased that between group differences that were found at the 4-month period were exemplified at the end of the 12-month trial. With this in mind, the large intervention effect size observed for perceived autonomy promoting climates adds credence to previous research that when you have a treatment staff who minimizes pressure and controls, they understand the perspectives of the patient, and they allow a provision of choices. Those treatment staff are perceived by participants as more autonomy supportive, and it allows for self-determined motivational regulations. Participants within the intervention showcase more autonomous self-regulation for treatment and exercise, higher exercise intrinsic motivation and perceived competence, more internal locus of causality, and more autonomous motives for exercise. Some other differences between the groups showcase that the intervention tapped into also as well into more general aspects of self-determination, such as awareness of self, showcasing how the intervention had massive effects on SDT variables. Psychosocial scores between the two groups were compared at the 4 and 12 months. Intrinsic and identified self-regulation increased with time within that intervention group, with significant time by group effects. This confirms that the intervention increased internalization of autonomous self-regulation for exercise during the first year, and that a present autonomy supportive climate will allow people to see the regulation of their of behavior as their own. So if I regulate my own happiness, if as an example, that is me doing it, not anybody else. This type of environment will allow this allows for the most autonomous forms of regulation to occur. We have to look at some critical outcomes involved with the exercise and physical activity notions at the intervention's end. The average moderate to vigorous physical activity was 300 minutes per week, and that is consistent with current physical activity recommendations. Steps per day was roughly 2,000 steps a day. More to controls and its variables influenced by environment and other contextual influences. Lifestyle physical activity, such as taking the stairs or standing more, was greatly influenced by the intervention, but due to that 7-day PAR that indicates moderate and vigorous physical activity longer than 10 minutes, it's possible for someone to accumulate lower intensity daily PA, yet report little to no moderate vigorous exercise. Since steps per day includes planned, unplanned walking, pedometry within this experiment could not capture daily lifestyle changes. The lifestyle index steps per day were moderately correlated, but those were not substantially increased figures compared to weight loss, weight control, and other forms of physical activity. As well, weight loss and changes at body composition are in line with other outcomes discussed. At the 12-month mark, compared to the controls, the intervention group achieved more weight loss along with a relative amount of weight loss from baseline that is consistent with healthy weight loss and the weight loss necessary for a reduction or a reducing of your health risks. 7% average is consistent with outcomes achieved in more intensive and comprehensive lifestyle change programs. The results in body composition changes show that weight loss was largely due to fat mass, or percent body fat was reduced by 6.9%. Now, to look at some limitations of the current paper, the control group, there was 3 of them in question. The control group's nature prevented direct comparisons of this intervention with other weight loss programs. The standard control group was done and it was built, if you will, in relation to testing motivational sequences imbued in SDT, and it was done in similar fashion to other research protocols. But this could enable an understanding of the mechanisms that allow for self-determined motivation of exercise in a weight loss environment if it was imbued fully in SDT. There was a lack of baseline assessments for exercise and treatment-related outcomes. Though there were no differences related to demographic and general SDT variables, there was a possibility that groups differed from the baseline, and that has to be acknowledged. And there was a lack of economic evaluation that could be a limitation. Since that trial was concerned with studying the mechanisms of behavior change, as well as identifying individual levels of predictors of success, cost analysis were not planned and could not be calculated post HOC. Now for a further discussion, the SDT intervention for weight control appears to have been well implemented, resulting in notable changes in exercise / physical activity behavior. and changes in weight and body composition that is clinically relevant and similar to similar SDT study intervention studies. The findings are consistent with previous studies completed in this theoretical framework. The results at the 1 year mark positively demonstrated two things. One, the intervention produced measurable improvements in main outcomes and psychological theory grounded variables relative to an appropriate control group, and that moderate to strong effect sizes were observed favoring the intervention. With all of this in mind, this paper showcases that interventions based in self-determination theory can be implemented successfully for weight management in enhancing the internalization of more autonomous forms of behavior regulation and exercise adherence. And here is the paper in question if any of you want to read it over yourselves. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great day.